Okay, hello everybody. We're here to talk about evaluation tables, or also known as evidence tables. So what is an evaluation table? This table, which has a template in Canvas that you will use, is a way to organize the evidence that you have found in the literature, whether it be research evidence or non-research evidence. But the way the categories are set up, which you will see in the template, makes it very easy. Well, number one, it makes sense of the data for you, but it also makes it much easier, much more efficient to be able to pull over the information that you have found on your evidence into your formal literature review. So the stronger your evaluation table is, the stronger your literature review will be. Okay, so before we move on very quickly, because this is a piece of the evidence table or the evaluation table, is the variables. We need you to identify the best you can the independent variables and the dependent variables. Independent variables are also known as the explanatory variable, the predictor variable, or the covariate, and it's the variable that is being controlled or manipulated. It's the treatment variable or the intervention variable. The dependent variable is also known as the outcome variable. It's what is affected. It is the variable that is affected by the independent variable. So if we had this research question, how does self-management patient self-education affect A1Cs on persons with type 2 diabetes, and we wanted to find the two variables, education would be our independent variable. That's the treatment or the intervention, and we want to see the effects that it has on the A1C. So A1C then is our outcome variable. This link that you see here below is a great link. It provides some very clear and I think succinct information on the types of variables. It also provides great information when we talk about level of measurement for the instruments or the scales, the two tools that you utilize. So I would access, and I think this was placed in your Canvas course earlier, but I would definitely access this link and utilize it. I think it really helps with understanding. Okay, so when we talk about quantitative and qualitative research, those are our two broad types of research per se. There is also mixed methods research. That is very complex because it's actually both of these and it's very time consuming. But if you think you have a mixed methods piece of evidence and you're not quite sure, just ask your instructor. So quantitative research can be described generally as descriptive or experimental. More specifically, we can divide it into descriptive, correlational, quasi, and experimental. Remember that, first of all, descriptive research applies to both quantitative and qualitative, which has been discussed in previous modules. And additionally, experimental research is what another word for that is our random controlled trials or studies. We do random assignment with our participants. Something to remember too is that when we talk about research types and designs, a research study, just one research study in itself, can be called a descriptive, correlational, quantitative study. So when you are, and we'll talk about this, but when you are identifying the type of evidence you have, and you need to state if it's qualitative or quantitative, and go a step further. If it's a quantitative, is it a correlational study? Is it a descriptive study? We want to know that, an RTC or a quasi. Okay, so those are your subtypes per se. The goal of quantitative research is generalization, meaning whatever findings we have, we can generalize to the entire population. And I mean the entire population. So if you think, you're looking for whatever your PICO question is, and you see there's a study out there done on Japanese patients that you think may be pertinent to your PICO question, that's good. Pull it in. That's okay. Because again, quantitatively, we want to be able to generalize to the entire populations. Okay. When we talk about qualitative research, we have some common categories, or different subtypes, I guess is another word you can utilize. And the common ones are ethnography, phenomenology, grounded theory, field, and narrative. There are others as well. But again, when you're in your evidence table and you're talking about what type of design it is, we want you to state this is a qualitative study with a grounded theory approach. And the research or the evidence should clearly state that. The goal, as you may recall, with qualitative research is to generate a deeper understanding of a phenomena. So with quantitative, think numbers. With qualitative, think words. Okay, measurements. When we're talking about measurements, we're talking about the scale, the instrument or the tool that's being used to measure the data. So this goes back to our quantitative studies, but you do need to address this as well. So I know that you guys are learning about this in your statistics is the nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio data. And also your textbook, Melnick, does talk about this as well. But what's really important when you guys get at that level of, or the evaluation table, is you do need to identify the scale or scales. Oftentimes quantitative studies use several scales. It's hard to say. But one thing we really want you to focus on is the reliability and validity. So there's study reliability and validity, which is discussed earlier in one of your modules, but also there's measurement reliability, and that was discussed as well. We want you to mention if a tool is reliable. That's internal consistency of the scale. And the way that is measured is through Cronbach's alpha. And this should be mentioned in the quantitative articles. And I guess I've never seen it not measured. A Cronbach's alpha should be 0.7 or greater. And if it is, that means the scale is reliable. So you need to mention that as well. If they don't have Cronbach's alpha measurement in there, then you need to state that as well. But that would be out of the norm. Okay, here is the evidence table that you guys will be utilizing. The template is in your modules. And you need to go to the specific assignment directions and the rubric to know exactly what it is you need to put in here. These are not full sentences. You don't write out the complete author's names, just the last name of each author and so forth. So this is basic, cut and paste, but don't paste over too much. The problem and the purpose. Make sure you state what the problem is. What's the problem that these people are identifying? That's generally found in the background of the evidence. And then what is the purpose? What is this piece of evidence trying to do?
Hey, Julie.
Hey. And then you have the design method. So you want to look at or say, for example, you have the quantitative research study, and it's utilizing it's a correlational and descriptive. Let me say that over. So let's say you have a correlational quantitative study. So it'd be a little more specific, or a qualitative study with a narrative approach. Sample and setting. The thing about sample and setting is we want to know the number, which is you utilize the N. N equals 118, so 118 participants. What are the characteristics of the population? Maybe it's looking at rape survivors. And then we want to know what the attrition rate is. So in other words, a lot of times, and this is mentioned, studies will start out with X amount of people, say 120, but by the end of the study, their true sample population is, let's say, 100. And just mention maybe why some people dropped out. I hate to say it, but like sometimes people die. So like if you're looking at chronic illness, that happens. But some people just don't want to finish it up, or they don't answer all the questions with the on the scales or the instruments, and that's okay. That is a huge difference between QI and research. Research is these people have the right to drop out of a study whenever they want. Okay, this goes back to the variables. Please identify them, but write the definition. Measurement of variables. This again goes back to what we just talked about. Name the scale. If you can't, if they have an author there, name it. I guess I've not seen an piece of evidence that doesn't have the author in parentheses next to that. And then again, mention the Cronbach's alpha. Data analysis, talk about what stats were used for a quantitative study. What was used, I have a method there for a qualitative. But really what we want to know is how did they analyze the data? And articles have little sections that are stated data analysis. Now, let's go back over here, because if you have non-research evidence, you're going to write QI project or literature review, things like that as well, okay? Remember, when you guys looked at this level of evidence that you looked at before, like systematic reviews or meta-analysis, when we talk about that, that's the kind we want that mentioned over here, what the design is, and that would be like a systematic review as well, okay, of quantitative studies, something like that. Study findings, make sure you write the findings out. So for the quantitative studies, you're going to report those in statistical numbers. So here you may say that the stats that were utilized were paired t-test or multiple linear regression, I don't know, something like that. But yet over here you're going to write what the findings are. And for qualitative, the method, oftentimes they'll talk about maybe they did bracketing or something like that. You'll see that in the data analysis. But what we really want to know is what themes they found in the study findings. Okay, so appraisal to worth and practice, talk about strengths and limitations of the study briefly. Was there a risk that should be of harm or intervention? And does this seem, this piece of evidence seem feasible to your practice? Okay, and then level of evidence, which you have already talked about, and we're just going to talk about it quickly on another slide. Some of this stuff will be NA according to the assignment directions, so make sure you look at that. All right, so next, this is the rating of the evidence. These are the three schemas, whatever we want you to use. The AACN level of evidence, Johns Hopkins, Winona State. I for sure would read this article. It's short. It helps you understand the hierarchy of evidence. But whatever, pick and choose one of these and rate your evidence that way. And then that's about it. So the next videos we will actually go through a review or applying each of these types of articles or evidence into the table. Okay.